She ridiculed the janitor in front of a full lobby, certain he was beneath her. What she didn't know was that he worked for the DOJ and had come prepared with a wire. The morning started like most others in downtown Phoenix. Dry heat rising off the pavement, the hum of air conditioners working overtime, and people moving fast, coffees in hand, earbuds in. No time to waste. Cheryl Lane Whitmore stepped out of her Uber in front of the glass-paneled high-rise that housed Cantrell & Pierce, LLP, one of the most feared litigation firms in the state. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she entered the lobby, phone pressed to her ear, barking something about a court filing delay. She was dressed in an ivory pantsuit, sharp enough to cut air, sunglasses still on, and her voice louder than necessary. Just inside the lobby, near the elevators, a janitor was mopping up what looked like a spilled iced coffee. He moved slow, intentional, back and forth over the mess like it was his one task for the day. Cheryl saw him, but didn't see him. She stopped just short of the wet floor sign and groaned. "Oh, seriously?" The janitor didn't look up. He kept mopping. Cheryl tilted her head, took off her glasses. "Excuse me," she said, waving a manicured hand like she was hailing a cab in 1998. "You're blocking the elevator." Still no response. He adjusted the mop head. Silent. She raised her voice, drawing attention from a security guard at the desk nearby. "Do you speak English, or—" The man finally looked up. Calm eyes. Maybe early 50s. Slim, brown skin, work shirt with a faded name tag that read, D. Carter. "Just finishing up here, ma'am," he said quietly. "Yeah, well, maybe you should mop before people start showing up for actual work. This isn't a bus station." He didn't react. No frown, no eye roll. Just looked at her like she was a cloud passing by. That irritated her more than any insult would have. She wasn't done. "Look," Cheryl continued, gesturing with one hand while holding her phone in the other. "I don't know where you worked before, but in this building, people expect things to be clean before 8 a.m. It's about standards. Maybe ask someone to train you if you're not sure what that looks like." He gave a small nod. "Understood. Good." She stepped around him and hit the elevator button with unnecessary force, sighing again like the entire world had just failed her. Behind her, the janitor went back to mopping, moving even slower now, each stroke measured. The doors opened, and Cheryl walked in without another word. From the front desk, the security guard, a guy in his 30s with tattoos peeking from under his sleeves, watched the whole thing and gave a small shake of his head. He knew the janitor. Friendly guy. Showed up early, never talked much, but always cleaned thoroughly and left no mess behind. The elevator doors slid closed, and inside, Cheryl was already dialing someone new. "You wouldn't believe the incompetence I just dealt with," she said, voice carrying through the metal box. Upstairs, on the 23rd floor, paralegals and associates were trickling in. Cheryl made a beeline to her glass-walled office, dropped her bag, and started issuing instructions before her assistant had even put down her coat. Meanwhile, in the lobby, Deshaun Carter finished mopping, wheeled the yellow bucket to the side, and pulled a phone from his back pocket. He typed a short note. Subject made unprovoked verbal contact at 7:48 a.m. Dismissive tone, racially coded language, maintained composure. He hit save and slid the phone away. Then he walked toward the staff elevator in the back, same way he did every morning. But what Cheryl didn't know was that she'd just walked straight into the middle of a federal investigation, and Deshaun wasn't there to clean floors. Deshaun Carter had learned, long ago, that people reveal who they are when they think no one of importance is watching. It didn't bother him anymore, not like it used to. He'd stopped wasting energy on anger. These days, he paid attention instead. Quietly, carefully. The staff elevator moved slow, creaking as it climbed from the lobby to the 3rd sublevel of the building, a place tenants never visited. Deshaun stepped out, past the boiler room, and entered a locked janitorial supply room. He flicked on the overhead light and closed the heavy door behind him. Then he pulled off the work shirt. Underneath it, a dark grey t-shirt, thin mic taped just below the collarbone. He took out a slim recorder from his pocket, checked the time code, and transferred the audio file with practiced precision to a hidden laptop tucked inside an old cardboard box labeled Bleach. He clicked play. Her voice was crystal clear, arrogant, dismissive, careless. It wasn't the first recording like that, and probably wouldn't be the last. The truth was, Deshawn hadn't cleaned a real floor in nearly a year. He was a federal prosecutor out of the Los Angeles office, temporarily assigned to a joint task force investigating discriminatory hiring and promotion practices across high-powered law firms in Arizona and Nevada. They'd started looking at Cantrell and Pierce after two former paralegals, both black women, filed separate complaints a year apart, each quietly dismissed by HR. The complaints themselves weren't enough to warrant action. Not in a firm that big, with lawyers that connected. But a pattern had started to form, and the Department of Justice wanted a deeper look. That's where Deshawn came in. He'd grown up in Bakersfield. His mother cleaned houses, his father drove freight. He knew what it meant when people looked through you like you didn't count. He remembered teachers mispronouncing his name every year and classmates laughing like it was a joke. But he wasn't bitter. He'd made it out. Made it through law school, made it into the U.S. Attorney's office. And when the opportunity came up to go undercover for a long-term discrimination probe, he didn't hesitate. He understood the assignment in a way others couldn't. Over the past 6 months, he'd rotated through 6 different buildings posing as janitorial staff. No one ever asked who he really was. No one looked past the uniform. Cantrell and Pierce had been flagged early. Quiet settlements, disproportionate turnover, promotion bottlenecks, and something worse. An air of elitism that was hard to prove but easy to feel. Deshawn's job wasn't to collect feelings, though. It was to gather proof. Every morning he clocked in before 6, reviewed his notes from the day before, then went upstairs with a mop and bucket like any other janitor. But every mop handle was hollow, housing a recording stick. Every trash bag liner had microscopic lenses embedded near the seal, and every harmless question he asked. "What time's the partner meeting?" "You staying late again tonight?" was intentional. He was piecing together a map. A trail of names, conversations, comments made offhand in elevators and break rooms, things said when people thought they were safe. And Cheryl? She was just another name on the list. Until today. Today she stepped out of line in public, in front of witnesses, on a building camera. That made her more than a name. She became a person of interest. Deshawn closed the laptop, tucked it away, and zipped up his duffel bag. He didn't hate Cheryl. In fact, hate rarely entered the equation. What he felt was disappointment, at how easy it still was to be ignored, talked down to, dismissed. At how many people like Cheryl existed in rooms that shaped laws and influenced decisions that affected families who looked like his own. He paused at the door, ran a hand over his shaved head, and let out a slow breath. Then he put the janitor shirt back on, buttoned it all the way up, and went back to work like nothing happened. But above the floor he just left, Cheryl was already getting comfortable. Too comfortable. And that meant Deshawn had more work to do. Cheryl Lane Whitmore wasn't the type to pause. She moved through her days like she was trying to beat some invisible stopwatch, always talking fast, always ahead of herself. In her office, corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chair that cost more than some used cars, she ran the room without raising her voice. Clients loved her because she was relentless. Colleagues respected her because she won. But there was another reason people didn't challenge Cheryl, and it wasn't just her record. It was her mouth. She had a talent for cutting remarks, the kind that sounded like compliments until they landed. She called it straight talk. Her assistant called it something else, but never out loud. That morning, after the incident in the lobby, Cheryl barely remembered it happened. To her, it was just another frustrating moment in a long list of things beneath her attention. She was already back to normal, slamming her phone on the desk, calling for depositions, asking who approved a motion without her name on it. "Candace," she called through the glass wall. "Why are there 3 typos in the brief from yesterday?" Candace, her assistant, walked in, face tight. "I didn't edit that one. You gave it to Travis." Cheryl blinked. "Then why didn't you double-check his work? You know he's not ready for that level of detail." Candace wanted to say she wasn't a babysitter. Instead, she nodded once and backed out. Cheryl shook her head, muttering, "One job? That's all they have? 1. It wasn't the first time someone heard that phrase from her. By noon, Cheryl had already taken 3 client calls and shouted down one junior partner who dared challenge her timeline. She ate half a salad at her desk and threw the rest away when she didn't like the dressing. Then she walked into the partners' lounge. The room was quiet, just 2 others inside. Bryce Everly, a mid-50s tax law expert with a stiff tie and stiff personality. And Jeanette Orloff, corporate mergers and acquisitions, sharp but observant. Cheryl poured coffee, then looked out the window. "You see the new janitor? The one downstairs?" Bryce didn't answer. Jeanette raised an eyebrow. "He moves like he's being paid by the hour to think," Cheryl said, chuckling. "Spilled coffee took 10 minutes to clean. I was late to my elevator." Jeanette stirred her tea slowly. "Maybe he's just thorough." Cheryl waved a hand. "It's not that. There's just this vibe, you know? Like he's watching everyone. Doesn't say much. Probably doesn't understand half of what's happening around him." Bryce finally looked up. "Cheryl, what?" "I didn't say anything wrong. I'm just saying, some people don't belong in certain environments. That's not racist. That's common sense." Jeanette put her cup down. "Actually, it is kind of racist. Just saying." Cheryl laughed. "Oh, come on. You know me. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I just believe in standards. Everyone should know their lane." Jeanette didn't respond. Bryce went back to his spreadsheet. The tension hovered for a moment before Cheryl left the room, coffee in hand, like nothing happened. In her mind, the problem wasn't what she said. It was how easily people took offense these days. She grew up in Flagstaff, went to Arizona State on a scholarship, clawed her way through law school surrounded by men who doubted her at every turn. She earned her place. Why shouldn't she hold others to the same level? What Cheryl couldn't see was how her version of standards had a pattern, one that always bent in her favor, one that always gave the benefit of the doubt to people who looked and sounded like her. And she especially didn't notice when someone was watching. But Deshawn hadn't missed a word, and now he had more than enough to trace her patterns back further than she ever expected. Downstairs, back in the supply room behind the boiler tanks and chemical barrels, Deshawn sat quietly on a folding chair, earbuds in, listening to the raw audio from the partner lounge. The mic he'd planted in the break room wall outlet 3 days ago had picked up everything. Cheryl's laughter, her comments, the awkward silence that followed. The device worked better than expected, catching every inflection, every little pause, the kind that told him exactly how people really felt. He labeled the file and backed it up to an encrypted flash drive before sending a copy to the DOJ case lead in Los Angeles. He didn't include commentary. The audio spoke for itself. It always did. He scrolled through his internal notes. Cheryl was far from the only person in that firm to make suspect remarks or act dismissively, but she'd become the most careless and the most vocal. There were signs of deeper rot, too. Promotion charts that showed odd trends, whisperings from paralegals about odd questions asked in interviews, anonymous emails sent to HR that disappeared into silence. Still, until today, Cheryl had been noise. Now she was a thread, and pulling that thread meant looking closer. That afternoon, Deshawn switched buildings. There were 3 janitorial staff across the Cantrell and Pierce Tower, each assigned to a different floor cluster. They didn't usually cross paths, but today, Deshawn volunteered to fill in on the 23rd floor while another worker handled some light repairs. It was subtle. He didn't want to spook anyone. He just needed access. At 3:20 p.m., he pushed the cart into the executive wing with his head down and his earpiece running. Nobody paid him any mind, just another pair of gloves and a mop bucket. He cleaned quietly outside Cheryl's office while she was on another call, this time about a pending settlement. She was speaking fast, as usual. "I don't care what he says. I want it closed by Friday. If the client wants to stall, we remind him who writes the checks. If he's got a problem with that, he can take his business to one of those boutique firms in Tucson." A pause. Then laughter. "Don't worry. They won't. People love to pretend they have options." Deshawn moved slowly, wiping the same spot on the glass partition for 3 minutes straight. At one point, Cheryl looked up and saw him through the window. He gave a small wave. She didn't return it. She turned back to her call and said, "These people forget they work for us, not with us." That was enough. He walked away before she noticed him listening. Later that evening, once most of the office had cleared out, Deshawn returned to the break room. He reached under one of the chairs near the table and retrieved the second mic he'd placed earlier that week. He scrolled through the recordings. Cheryl again, this time talking to Travis, a junior associate. "You want to make partner here?" she'd asked. "Here's the secret. Talk like them, dress like them, work harder than them. But don't act like you came here to change anything. They don't want new energy. They want mirrors." Travis had laughed. Nervous, unsure. "I'm just trying to stay above water." "Well," Cheryl said, "don't swim too far from shore. People drown when they forget they're not built for the deep end." The metaphors were tired. The message wasn't. Deshawn closed his notebook, made a short voice memo, and stored it on the backup drive. At this point, the case was moving. Quietly. Strategically. Evidence was mounting, and Cheryl was leading the charge, without even realizing it. But there was still one piece missing, and Deshawn knew it wouldn't take long before she gave it to him herself. Friday morning came with tension in the air, though no one said it out loud. There was no memo, no email, no meeting on the calendar, just a strange edge to everything. Deshawn felt it the moment he stepped inside the lobby. People were walking a little faster, phones were held a little tighter, conversations were shorter. Cheryl didn't notice any of it. She breezed in at 8:11 a.m., sunglasses on despite the dim light inside, phone already at her ear. By 8:13, she was chewing out a paralegal for printing the wrong draft of a deposition. "Are we hiring high schoolers now?" she said loudly in the hallway, her voice echoing off the glass walls. The paralegal, a quiet woman named Amanda, murmured an apology, eyes on the floor. Cheryl snorted and kept walking. Deshawn was nearby, wiping down the water cooler. Amanda passed him on her way to the copier room. She didn't say anything, but her face said enough. By noon, Cheryl was in a mood. A client had pulled out of an upcoming arbitration and blamed her for being too aggressive in tone. She blamed Travis. Again. They sat in her office, with the blinds half drawn. Deshawn stood 2 doors down, pretending to fix a slow-leaking sink in the kitchenette. "You told them we'd pursue max damages, right?" she snapped. Travis fumbled. "I repeated what you said in the call. Then why do I get an email from the client saying he feels threatened by the language used? You think that's me? They don't talk to me like that. You must have softened it, or worse, messed it up entirely." "I didn't," Travis said. "I read your language verbatim." Cheryl stood up. "Then maybe your face said something different. Maybe they saw you and thought, 'Oh, this guy's not the shark I expected.'" Travis blinked. "Excuse me, don't play sensitive," Cheryl said, waving a hand. "You know how this works. You've got to project something. Make people take you seriously. Right now, you give grad school intern, not future partner." There was a pause. Then she added, "And if you're going to stay here, you need to stop playing the 'I'm different' card. It doesn't matter where you're from or what group you think you represent. Just do the work. That's how we get respect. Not by pushing diversity quotas or trying to impress the DEI committee." Outside, Deshawn closed the wrench set slowly and stood still for a moment. That was it. That was the moment. He didn't need to dig deeper. She'd volunteered the truth herself, on tape, in her office, without a trace of hesitation. Later that day, Deshawn made one final entry in his log. He listed the time, date, location, keywords used, and internal relevance to the case. The file was marked Escalation Trigger. At 3:42 p.m., he stepped outside the building and made a short call to his DOJ contact. "We're ready to move," he said. No dramatic arrests, no press conferences. That wasn't how this worked. Instead, a quiet internal audit request was submitted to the firm's board. A letter marked Time-Sensitive, Personnel Ethics Review. It arrived Monday morning. The same day, 2 federal attorneys entered the building, posing as potential clients. One sat with a partner for a scheduled tour. The other requested a private discussion with the head of HR. By midweek, rumors swirled like smoke in a sealed room. HR sent a firm-wide email reminding staff that all internal communications might be subject to review. A second message followed. If you believe you've experienced or witnessed workplace misconduct, we encourage you to come forward. Some did. Others didn't need to. The tapes were doing the talking. And Cheryl? She still didn't see it coming. But the silence growing around her wasn't just awkward. It was calculated. And soon, she'd feel just how cold that kind of silence could get. The shift was subtle at first. Cheryl noticed it during the Tuesday morning partner meeting. People who usually greeted her with nods or half smiles avoided her gaze. Bryce, who always sat to her left, chose a seat farther down. Jeanette kept her responses clipped, her tone neutral. Even Candace, her assistant, had grown quieter. She delivered messages without lingering, answered only what was asked, and no longer pretended to laugh at Cheryl's sarcasm. Cheryl chalked it up to stress. There had been a lot of pressure lately. People were overworked. Maybe someone leaked rumors about her client loss. Or maybe HR was tightening up again. Those emails about misconduct and anonymous tips were probably spooking everyone. She wasn't worried, but she should have been. Because by Wednesday, things began to move faster. The firm's managing partner, Elliot Greaves, called a sudden mandatory meeting for all senior staff. That never happened without notice. Cheryl was irritated before she even walked in. The conference room was full. Everyone looked restless. Elliot stood at the head of the table, a thick folder in front of him. "This won't take long," he said, voice tight. "We've received a formal notice of investigation from the Department of Justice regarding internal conduct, promotion practices, and discriminatory behavior. This comes with verified audio evidence, recorded by an embedded federal official." Murmurs spread like a wave. Cheryl looked up, confused. She hadn't heard about any investigation. She looked around the room for answers, but most people weren't looking back. "We are cooperating fully," Elliot continued. "That includes sharing all relevant communications, reviewing partnership pathways, and conducting individual interviews. The DOJ has identified key individuals of interest. They've already spoken with our compliance team. Some of you will be contacted directly." That word, individuals of interest, landed like a glass shattering. Cheryl felt heat rise behind her ears. "Do we know who they are?" someone asked. Elliot didn't answer that. Instead, he opened the folder and laid down the first document, a printed transcript of a conversation. The heading read, "Partner Lounge. Audio file 027. Cheryl's stomach turned. She didn't have to read it to recognize her own words. She stood. "I'd like to speak with you privately." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You'll have your chance, during the official interview. Elliot, if this is about that janitor," he held up a hand. "It's not about a janitor. It's about all of them, and how they're treated, and how you treat people who you think can't affect your career." She froze. The room didn't move. Someone whispered, "She's on it." Cheryl grabbed her bag and walked out, her heels clacking loud down the hallway. That sound that once commanded respect now sounded like panic. Meanwhile, down on sub-level 3, Deshawn stood in a different uniform. No mop, no gloves, no badge that said D. Carter. He wore a charcoal grey blazer, pressed slacks, and carried a simple leather case with his credentials tucked inside. When he entered the elevator, security didn't stop him. At 2:05 p.m., he walked into the firm's HR office and was met by 2 senior attorneys and a compliance officer. No drama, no grand reveal. He simply opened the folder, handed over the final report, and said, "Everything you need is inside." When asked to confirm his identity, he gave his full name and title: Deshawn R. Owens, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Civil Rights Division. Back upstairs, Cheryl sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen without blinking. She hadn't received an interview time yet, but it didn't matter. She could feel the wall closing in. Her name was in the transcript, her voice on the recordings. Her straight talk, now part of an official complaint from 2 current associates, and 1 intern who had been in the break room months ago, silently taking notes. What she thought were harmless quips were now listed under patterned bias and verbal harassment. No one had come to remove her yet, but no one defended her either. And as Cheryl sat in her glass office, surrounded by silence, The realization settled in. Respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. And once lost, it didn't come back easily. A week later, Cheryl was gone. No official statement, no firm-wide announcement. Her name simply vanished from the company directory. The plaque outside her office disappeared. Her assistant, Candace, quietly boxed up the desk and left the items at security for someone to collect. Some people pretended to be surprised. Most weren't. Whispers filled the office. She got pushed out. No severance. They found more than just the tapes. There were emails, but no one said anything loud. It was like talking about a ghost, someone who used to exist, now erased. Up on the 23rd floor, Travis sat at a new desk. His voice carried a little more weight now. He didn't change who he was, but people listened differently. Jeanette took over most of Cheryl's client list. Bryce started arriving earlier, more attentive. Small shifts, real ones. The culture didn't flip overnight, but something cracked open. Downstairs, in a side conference room rented by the Department of Justice, a group of employees gave testimony behind closed doors. Deshawn sat with them, not as a janitor, not even as the lead investigator, but as someone present to listen, to show face, to remind them that what they said mattered. One of the paralegals, Amanda, spoke for the first time in front of a legal official. She'd been silent for years. Her voice trembled at first, but it steadied as she explained the way things were, how often comments were disguised as jokes, how bias was baked into the silence that followed them. Deshawn didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. By the end of the meeting, she looked relieved, not happy, but lighter. When it was all over, Deshawn packed his files and prepared to head back to Los Angeles. Outside the building, on a shaded bench near the corner of Monroe and 2nd Avenue, he sat for a moment, watching people pass. Businessmen, bike messengers, a teenage girl arguing with her mom over a phone call, a delivery guy pushing a cart of food. He blended in again, like always. A young man from the building, someone from accounting, walked past, paused, then turned. "Hey," he said. "You worked down in janitorial, right?" Deshawn looked up. Calm. "I did. You still with the firm?" "No. Just finished what I came to do." The man hesitated. "You were always cool to me. Just wanted to say that. I didn't realize you were, Deshawn smiled. "That's the point." They shook hands. It was quick, no drama, just a gesture between two people who'd shared the same space, even if only for a while. Later that day, Deshawn gave a private talk at Arizona State University's law school. Not a big speech. No cameras, just a room full of students and a few faculty. He told them the story, not with names or recordings, but with meaning. "People will tell you that power looks a certain way," he said. "That it dresses a certain way, speaks a certain way. That it only listens to itself. But the truth is, power's not about volume or position. It's about what you do when no one thinks you're watching. It's how you treat the person cleaning your office, not the one signing your check." He paused. "Let it sit. And one more thing," he added. "Never assume the person you look down on doesn't have the power to change your life." The students clapped, not like they were watching a show, but like they understood something real. That night, Deshawn flew home. He didn't post about it, didn't tell anyone what he'd done. He went back to work, picked up another case. Same mission, different faces. But he never forgot Cheryl Lane Whitmore. Not because she was cruel, but because she was ordinary. The kind of person the system protects until someone asks the right questions. And maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through someone you thought was invisible. 12 months passed, and life at Cantrell and Pierce LLP had changed, but not in the way anyone had expected. The firm still stood, still boasted its long client list, still operated from the same gleaming tower in Phoenix. But the temperature inside had shifted. People listened more. Some looked inward. A few left entirely. And Cheryl? She disappeared from the legal world as quickly as her name had been removed from the firm's website. No press, no LinkedIn update, no quiet rebranding on a smaller firm's page. It was as if she'd been erased, not by force, but by consequence. Those close to her said she'd gone back to Flagstaff, where her family still owned property. One former colleague claimed she'd taken up photography. Another said she was working on a book. No one really knew, and no one pushed to find out. What mattered more was the space she left behind, and what filled it. Inside the firm, DEI trainings became more than lip service. Hiring committees expanded. HR installed a third-party hotline for anonymous concerns. Travis, now a senior associate, had helped draft the new mentoring protocol, one that focused on merit without erasing identity. It was slow progress, but it was real. Meanwhile, Deshawn Owens had taken on 3 more investigations since Cantrell and Pierce. One involved a medical board in Fresno, another focused on a public university in Nevada. The third, still in early stages, hinted at something far bigger, national, even systemic. But in the middle of all of that, he made time for something else. At South Mountain High School, just 15 minutes from the firm that once ignored him, Deshawn visited a class of 11th graders once a month to talk about law. Not theory, not case law, just life. In March, one of the students, a quiet kid named Darius, raised his hand. "Were you scared?" he asked. "When you were there, pretending to be someone else?" Deshawn paused. "I wasn't scared," he said. "I was tired. Tired of watching people get dismissed before they opened their mouths. Tired of seeing the same people win by default. So I stopped hoping someone else would say something, and I did it myself." Darius nodded. "Did it work?" Deshawn smiled. "Depends what you mean. Did we fix everything? No. But we started something, and sometimes that's the part people forget. You don't always have to finish the fight. You just have to refuse to sit down." That line stuck with the students. One of them wrote it on a poster during Black History Month. Another quoted it in her college application essay. Back in his LA office, Deshawn kept the old janitor's uniform in a plastic bag in the back of his closet. Not as a trophy, not even as a reminder, but as proof. Proof that the world still judged people by the surface, proof that character still mattered, and proof that sometimes the most powerful person in the room was the one no one saw coming. He didn't tell people about the case anymore, not in detail. The transcripts were sealed, the files closed. But every time he stepped into a new room, every time someone looked at him and underestimated him, he remembered Cheryl. He remembered how quickly people revealed who they really were when they thought it didn't matter. And that's what stuck with him the most. Not the headlines, not the case files, but the lesson. How easily people forget that respect isn't earned through job titles or law degrees. It's earned in silence, in service, and in how you treat those you think have nothing to offer you. If this story moved you, made you pause, or reminded you of someone you know, take a moment to think about the spaces you walk through every day. Who do you overlook? Who do you talk over? And who might be watching, not with anger, but with purpose? Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us every person has a story. And sometimes the quietest ones echo the loudest.